With Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 21, the power levels, they've gone all the way through the roof, and the daughter of Sasuke Uchiha has officially broken ground for uncomfortable conversations that have to be had in regards to where she ranks in the Uchiha clan pecking order. But more importantly, as Sarada has started to rise to a level of greatness, Boruto Uzumaki has descended onto the battlefield, bringing with him the looming shadow of Jura appears ready to be cast over the battlefield now that Boruto's there. However, for as big as those nuggets of information are, the journey to how we got there is equally as important. So we open up the chapter with a flashback, or rather a series of flashbacks that show the various events from Sarada's perspective that start out slowly and quickly serve as a crescendo for the reveal of Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan and to explain to people how she awakened it in the first place. We see Sarada looking over the village with Chocho at some point during Boruto Part 1, where she tells Chocho that her dream is to become Hokage, and based on the design, it appears as if this was set after the events of Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage, and the Scarlet Spring, which for anime watchers, you know that as the Shin Uchiha arc. But we can surmise from this that Sarada doesn't have her headband, so this is likely after that, and neither does Chocho, which Chocho is just as boy crazy as you remember her to be from early Boruto, with her only ambition at this point being finding a boyfriend. This leads to Sarada recalling Boruto's promise to be the shadow for her as a future Hokage, to continue to serve in the role that Sasuke has for Naruto. We see Sarada blushing, and then we see Sumire asking Sarada from Part 1 if it bothers her if Boruto's popular with the other girls because it bothers Sumire, and now we get a small glimpse into what Sarada's real answer on that was. But the way that Ikimoto panels it, he makes the good choice of showing Naruto explaining that to Sarada, this is what it means to be Hokage, which another interesting choice here is that Ikimoto basically redrew a scene from Naruto Gaiden, but he did it from Sarada's perspective, which I totally love that Easter egg. We then transition over to a shot of Sarada running through the village, and we get deeper insight into all of her feelings, in particular her insecurities when she says that she is not an amazing shinobi, which is something I find very interesting, just given where Sarada was as a Genin in Part 1, but it's a nice homage to the mistake that her own father made in Naruto Part 1, where Sasuke couldn't see how much progress he had made because he was measuring his own strength in comparison to Naruto's growth, basically being annoyed that Naruto was growing at a faster rate than himself, that he couldn't see his own progress. Sarada, at this point, she has her ninja headband. She is a Genin. She has gone on missions, but she has clearly made the same mistake as her father. Before Boruto started using the Karma Seal, her and Boruto, they were always relative to each other in base. When Kakashi called Boruto easily above Chunin level in the anime, everything we saw leading up to that suggested Sarada was relative to Boruto. In the Boruto movie novel and in the manga promotional material for the Versus Momoshiki arc chapters, it said that her and Boruto was scaled to Jonin level of power, yet her comrade was gaining power via the Karma Seal that suddenly had him strong enough that Naruto was forced to brace himself in base to take blows from Boruto and Karma and use Shadow Clone trickery to win their sparring match, where Boruto uses that lightning release jutsu and detonates Naruto's Shadow Clone. Momoshiki took over Boruto's body and just destroyed Boro in one hit. She was being left behind as more time passed, and we see here that just like it did in the anime, it was weighing on her. Long before she ever told Mitsuki that they needed to get strong enough to fight against Otsutsuki in chapter 69 of Boruto Part 1. Sarada then says that she can't waste time thinking about pointless things, which those pointless things are implied to be sorting out her feelings for Boruto because she is locked in on becoming Hokage, which brings us to the moment that Boruto saves Sarada from being killed by Kawaki, and we see how she viewed Kawaki from that perspective, which is interesting. Then the memories, they jump forward to the night that Omnipotence was casted, and now Naruto's been announced dead, and Sasuke was saying that he was going to kill Boruto for trying to kill Kawaki and for killing Naruto and Hinata, and we start seeing the beginning Sarada's emotional breakdown here as she learns what happens and she begins to shed tears for Boruto because once again Boruto has to carry a cruel burden on his own. This leads to the Mangekyo Sharingan and what these flashback panels were truly intended for. It wasn't just to give us a deep look into Sarada doubting herself. It was to once again drive home something that I said 2 years ago when this chapter dropped in that video titled Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan was not bad writing, because there are too many people who misremember how the Mangekyo Sharingan is stated to awaken in the manga and what truly causes it. The common thought that a lot of people have is that you just kill your best friend or you see a friend die. People harken back to Itachi saying that that was the requirement, when the manga tells us that that's not the only requirement. The eyes of the Uchiha, they evolve when there's either a loss of a loved one, which is where you have the more common thing that people remember, someone being killed in front of you, or it comes from despair and deep mental disappointment in oneself during an extremely traumatic experience. This is Ikimoto laying everything out for you as a reader. Sarada's idol was Naruto. She strived to get stronger to be Hokage after Naruto steps down. Boruto is someone who is special to her in more ways than just a friend. Kawaki literally just tried to kill her and Boruto. Now she has learned that everyone's memories of Boruto and Kawaki are swapped, and at the time they didn't have answers as to how. They only had speculation. Her own father, someone who Boruto idolized, someone who Boruto wanted to walk in his shoes, he's out there saying that he's gonna hunt down Boruto to kill him to avenge the death of Naruto and Hinata, which is another shock to Sarada because her idol is now dead. Someone she herself said more than once, like say in episode 205 of the anime, that she wished that Naruto was her father instead of Sasuke. And she's now shedding tears at the helplessness and disappointment in herself that came from being powerless to stop Mitsuki and Sasuke from hunting down Boruto to kill him. Death doesn't have to be right in your face to awaken Mangekyo Sharingan. And Sasuke explains this to Boruto, a perfect balance of show and tell. Sasuke tells Boruto, who now has been bandaged up after their conversation with Ada and Damon in chapter 80 of Boruto Part 1, and he says Mangekyo Sharingan is a mutation of the Sharingan that is awakened when you undergo extreme mental or emotional shock, basically extreme trauma. This is why Sasuke ultimately chose to trust in Sarada to save Boruto, because the Mangekyo Sharingan are stated to be the eyes that reflect the heart, in particular for a clan that is stated to feel love on a deeper level than any other clan in the series, which is why Sasuke has protected Boruto. Sasuke tells Boruto that Sarada didn't even appear to realize what had happened, but says so when she does realize it, that Mangekyo Sharingan power is about to be broken, which it is, as we'll see in a moment. And part of the reason why is the triangles in her eye. They are a straight pattern, which we learn in Naruto's manga. They are stronger Mangekyo Sharingan than others, and they are extremely rare, that being a straight pattern Mangekyo Sharingan. This brings us to Sarada staring down Ryu with an enraged look on her face as everyone begins to figure out what's going on, and Yodo's dead body is being held by her teammate. Ryu tries to launch an attack with this iron sand, which Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan is able to absorb because part of her power is making those black holes that float behind her. Each has different functions that we'll touch on in a moment in terms of what it can do. For now, all you need to know is that the jutsu is being sucked into that black hole when she's able to make eye contact with whatever. Ryu jumps to the same conclusion, and he tries to get a sneak attack by attacking Sarada from the blind spot, but Sarada quickly reacts to it, and once again, Ryu is sucked up into that black hole, except this time, it's not just the one standing beside her, but instead, Sarada has another black hole that is able to suck the iron sand up into it from the opposite direction. And you can tell that Ryu's reaction to Sarada is basically her taking control of the battlefield, and he's trying to figure out what her power is and how it works. But now the number of black holes, it is 4, and they have Ryu and the claw grimes completely boxed in. Basically, all of Sarada's blind spots are covered now. It should be worth noting that Sarada has 8 triangles in her eye, but we have 4 black holes that are being shown, which lines up with the fact that she's only using 1 power of the 2 unique powers that her Mangekyo Sharingan has. This is where we see the other benefit of those black holes that she has. She is able to control the gravity of the targets, and she lifts herself up and Ryu into the sky high above the desert, which I want to address something I've been seeing with people. Her using gravity manipulation to use a pseudo form of flight that's no different than the Deva path using the push and pull element to fly in the Pain arc, and it's no different than Onoiki and the current Tsuchikage flying during the 4th Great Ninja War. Characters can fly in the Naruto universe without 6 Paths chakra. This is nothing new. Ryu tries to use his Iron Sand to penetrate the ground. He's trying to anchor himself and to pull himself back down towards the ground. But Sarada, she makes light work of that Iron Sand once again, and Mitsuki explains it to the audience that Sarada's power allows her to manipulate gravity by using those black holes or spears, depending on the translation you get. Very curious to see what Viz Media calls it. The spear that she controls, it functions like a black hole. So black holes, they suck things in using gravity, which is extremely strong because a black hole is a massive amount of mass, but it is condensed down into a tiny point. When you condense high volumes of stuff into a small point, it makes it stronger. This is called a singularity because every object has gravity, but black holes are more intense due to the large amount of mass that is condensed into that small space, which can pull so strong that not even light itself can escape, which is how stars, lights, and planets can be sucked into black holes, just as Sarada is doing with Ryu's attacks. But as Mitsuki says, she is able to select what she is sucking up into that hole. This leads to Sarada telling Ryu that she's not running away anymore. She felt as if her goal of being Hokage was too far away because of when all those events happened, like say the battle with Ishiki and then later on the battle with Code where Boruto died and she found out after the fact she wasn't able to do anything. Her own inability to participate, it scared her. And that makes sense. You want to be Hokage, yet the threats that the Hokage faces now, they're well above any threats that the Hokages 1 through 6 have ever had to face. Dealing with an Orochimaru, dealing with a Madara, dealing with a Kaguya, dealing with a Toneri with the Tenseigan. That is a cakewalk compared to what you had with Jigen and then later on Ishiki. Even now, her own feelings for Boruto, that's something that she wasn't ready to accept, weighing them against Sumire's open admission of liking Boruto. She looked at all that like it was a weakness getting in the way of her goal to be Hokage, so she ignored it. But she also concedes that she knew she was denying this power that is inside of her. In particular, saying that she kept it hidden. Power that was originally awakened in response to her helplessness due to Boruto's situation and being unable to do anything for a person she cares deeply for. Whereas Mitsuki is looking like he wants all the tea right here. Ryu is basically saying she needs to go to therapy, and that's where we get a very interesting set of lettering that I'm going to be very curious to see if Viz Media uses translation notes for, which as a reminder, they stopped doing translation notes for God knows what reason. But shouts out to one of my favorite translators that are online, Salad Bolts, who lives over in Japan, came in very clutch here, reliable translator. So the lettering that is used is a Japanese word that can be used to describe someone with darkness in their heart, is mentally unstable, or they're a woman obsessed with their partner in a romantic relationship, which that is a classic example of what longtime viewers of the channel have heard me say repeatedly. Japanese to English is not a verbatim translation because it is context heavy, and there are usually 3 to 4 different meanings for various words. It just depends on the context of how they're used, which that makes this one tricky because literally every definition applies here. This leads to Sarada choosing in that moment to use her Mangekyo Sharingan to draw in Ryu's body into one of those black holes to begin sucking him up into it. And Sarada looks down at Ryu saying that she is done running away because running away means you can't save people. And we see Yodo's dead body, which spark up a blunt for Yodo. She died way too soon. As Sarada begins to increase the gravity of the black hole, Ryu desperately tries to make a claw grime that he pulls from his body to use it to escape, which does get Jura's attention, but Sarada clocks what he's trying to do and increases the gravity to a point he can't even fully use the Shinjutsu that is known as the claw mark in order to escape. This leads to Sarada stating that she's gonna be Hokage, which if this is anything like the effect it had on Naruto, who we learned in the first Naruto fan book that every time Naruto said that he was gonna be Hokage during the midst of a fight, Naruto actually got a mental amp, because it's the concept of kotodama, the Japanese belief that words give power when you speak them. Hence why you see so many anime characters with special moves and they shout them out. If this applies to Sarada, then she got a mental amp here and a well-timed one. And this is where Sarada reveals the name of her Mangekyo Sharingan power. And as she does so, all 8 triangles from her Mangekyo, they are shown in a gorgeous single-page spread for the reveal, which bravo for that. Everyone clamors for double-page spreads, but series like Boruto and Eden Zero and Full Metal Alchemist that will use single-page spreads just as effective. This Mangekyo Sharingan is called the Mangekyo Sharingan Ohirume, which is a connection to Amaterasu, the Japanese deity who Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan is patterned after. So the translation you get when you place the accent mark, very important, over the U, it comes down to the Great Sun Lady, or she who is a noble woman of the Great Sun, which is fitting since Sarada is of the Uchiha clan, one of the 4 noble clans of Konoha. It's also a nod to another title that Amaterasu has, which is Ohirume no Muchi no Kami, which is she who illuminates the heavens, which cue up the memes of Sarada being the new Gojo, where he talks about himself in the heavens when he's fighting against Fushiguro back during that flashback. This leads to a monstrous display of power by Sarada. That black hole, it sucks Ryu in and it explodes. This was a nod to the Hawking radiation theory of black holes, which is that after 1 trillion years, black holes become so compressed and dense with mass that they eventually reach a point where it releases a final burst of energy in the form of an explosion, which, reminder, Boruto as a series has dabbled with science before. It's one of the core conflicts. Where does science fit into this world of ninja? So that does line up with this aspect. It's at this point that Sarada, her eyes, they're bleeding more than before. She's falling onto the ground. She's closing her eyes in exhaustion, and Mitsuki has to catch her. With the victory over Ryu now being secured, which that is a big deal. Ryu was not a pushover in terms of power. There's this notion to just go, oh, the Shinju, they're made out of 10 tails, so they gotta be 10 tails level, which is basically the same thing as saying if somebody's using Sage Mode, they're as strong as Sage Mode Naruto, or if a Dragon Ball character goes Super Saiyan, they're only strongest Namek Saga Goku, when in reality, this is not the case. So they are made from a collection of different things. I want you to think of it like a recipe for a meal. You're in the kitchen and you're adding all these ingredients together for whatever it is you're about to eat. So you have Tentel's chakra. They also have the chakra of Code, who has his limiters removed and is now stronger than Jigen. You have Code's Karma Seal, which contains the essence from Ishiki, but cannot be used for resurrection purposes, but that karma has the essence in it. And Boruto says in chapter 6, even though Code is not an Otsutsuki, the power itself that is in that karma is Otsutsuki power, which is used to influence all of this. And Jura later confirms Boruto's theory about Code being the one who birthed these awakened Shinju using that. You also have the chakra of the person that the claw grind bit in order to create the Thorn Soul bulb. So you're taking the chakra of someone like Sasuke and you're placing it into a pot. And due to the Shinju being made from Code, they also have Shibai cells, which is another power buff. That is why Mamushi, who was made from Bug's chakra, Bug was a pushover. That is why Mamushi was strong enough to put base Boruto on a defensive. So you're taking all of that stuff, you're stirring it in the pot, and you're containing all that chakra in the humanoid body. That's why you have the completed dish that you do. This is why Code could not break out of Ryu's chokehold despite actively trying and then begging to be released because he couldn't break free of his own power. That is why Ryu was never impressed with Code when he saw him use Koma to try and attack Jura, and why Jura casually told Ryu, hey, yeah, if you want to kill Code next time you see him, feel free. They are above Code in power, which is scary given that base Code was strong enough that adult Sasuke told Boruto, quote, we stand no chance against him, end quote. And Boruto is confirmed to have attempted to use the coma seal, which lends itself to base code's power level being that high, which makes Jura's assessment about Ryu getting the green light to kill Code make that much more sense. Linear scaling. Moving back to the story though, as Mitsuki is tending to Sarada, he notices that the Thorn Soul bulb it is manifesting, which transitions us over to Ada speaking to Boruto and Kashin Koji. She says that Ryu was killed by Sarada, and Kashin Koji reveals that everything is going according to plan if Yodo had to be sacrificed, which that definitely sets Boruto off immediately. So if you recall, Boruto asked in chapter 17, what were the chances of failure? And Koji said it wasn't that high that they would fail, but Koji purposely left out that there would be those who needed to die in order to get the outcome that he wanted. Basically pawns that are being sacrificed on the chessboard. He confronts Koji asking, was this the only way? And Koji doubles down saying that Boruto getting involved, had that happened, Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan power would have never reawakened, and he didn't think that it mattered if Boruto knew Yodo died because they still got the outcome they needed. And that's the difference between Koji and Jiraiya. Whereas Jiraiya would have been more sensitive, Koji is cold, pragmatic, and calculated. Boruto realizing that Koji has no problems letting other people die, he demands to know what will happen to Konohamaru, and Koji tells him, after hesitating, that Jura has shared senses with all the Shinju on the battlefield, and that if Boruto shows himself, it will result in Boruto getting killed because Koji has seen multiple possible futures where all this happens. That's where we jump over to Konohamaru, who's in the process of being killed by Matsuri, which goes back to the last chapter. Konohamaru does not scale to Matsuri. That's disingenuous scaling, just like people scaling Chocho to being relative to Jura because she was able to knock a stationary Jura being held in place by Shikadai's shadow possession jutsu. This was more so he used a sneak attack to catch her off guard, which is why being hit by a double giant Rasengan when you are completely off guard almost destroyed her body. It is a sucker punch. If I walk up to Roman Reigns tomorrow at WrestleMania Night 1, as of this recording, and I hit him from behind, I can knock him out. I'm not as strong as Roman though. A shuriken gets lodged in Matsuri's shoulder, and Boruto, he's teleported onto the battlefield, and by doing so, he's confirmed for Mitsuki that those metal pieces that Boruto leaves behind, they are used for teleportation purposes. So now all eyes are on Mitsuki. Does he tell Kawaki, who can shrink those markers in the future? So file that away, and we'll come back to that in future chapters. Boruto doesn't hesitate. He draws his sword, and he hacks Matsuri into pieces, and Kashin Koji curses Boruto, because now Jura has realized that Boruto's there, and Jura appears ready to make his move. This was an enjoyable chapter, one where Sasuke fans, they got to eat for seeing a little bit of the blank period travels with Boruto and Sasuke, and Sarada fans, they got to eat because they got to see this really overpowered Mangekyo Sharingan power, and that power of gravity control, it is crazy. And there's a second power that we don't know yet. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Clicking here on the left to check out more Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter reviews. Click up here up top to watch this new video from my Everything One Piece Explained channel, or click here on the right to check out my new video on my Anime Explained channel.